Hello, my name's Lauren. I'm a textile artist living in New York. Not just a textile artist, I do a lot of different art, multidisciplinary, you could say. But if you're watching this, you're probably from my Instagram, which is never.tied.down. It'll be linked below and probably on the screen here. Basically, quick intro because I know people just kind of want a tutorial and go. I'm going to make a longer one just kind of to me and who I am, but very quickly, 2 months ago I started that Instagram account, and it was basically a pursuit of an art business. I've always wanted to be able to make money selling my art, and we'll see where it goes. But so far, 2 months in, 5,000 plus followers, which is great. I think what I like a lot about that account is it's not just me posting my own art, but also promoting just artists to get out there and make stuff. It's an inspiration page, you know. A lot of my videos in my Reels tab are about just inspiring people to forget what people are going to think about you and just kind of get out there and make stuff, because it's really important. Art's really important to me. It's like my whole life, really. So I really just want more people to try it, more people to do things. Especially in the times we're living in, you know, I think it's important. If you're not already following, I would love for you to be following along on Instagram. And without further ado, this is an intro on how to unravel a thrifted sweater. So I've written down a lot of notes because there are a lot of things that go into this. It's not as easy as my video that I made it seem. Basically, I made a video about a week ago on my Reels tab that was me unraveling that sweater and being able to make 2 garments out of it. I got 4 skeins and made this baby tee that people really want the pattern for. Also, I self-drafted it and I barely wrote it down, so I won't be doing a pattern for it probably. I also need to figure out how to grade sizes and stuff. But I might do a tutorial for the cap sleeve because I think that's mainly what people like about it. Be on the lookout for that on my YouTube. Getting into how to unravel a thrifted sweater. Okay, so there are about 5 steps to this, and it is more involved than you think it is. So if you're watching that video and thinking it was super easy, yes, it's easy once you do it a few times and get used to the steps, but the first go around, I mean, you might end up having a really hard time with it. I definitely did my first time. This is something that I learned in my machine knitting class at school. So a learning curve a little bit, but once you figure it out, it's very easy, very simple. So 5 steps. The main thing that you want to look out for is what type of sweater. A lot of comments and some DMs that I was getting on Instagram was, I've tried this before and it totally didn't work. I just wasted a whole sweater. You probably didn't pick the right sweater. And that's what people think with this method, that you can't just go to the thrift store and get whatever sweater you want and it'll work for every single one. It doesn't. This method is not for every single type of yarn. It's not for every type of sweater. You know, you have to be very intentional with what you're buying. So that you don't waste the material and you don't waste your time. You know, you don't want to spend your time unraveling a sweater that you can't repurpose for yarn, and you don't want to unravel a sweater that somebody else could have bought and worn. Okay, so it's what sweater to pick, how to unravel, how to prep hanks for washing and drying, which I just put together, and then winding back into cakes to be able to be used. This is chapter 1. Chapter 1, what sweater to pick. There are a few rules that are pretty important for what type of sweater you're going to pick. First thing I want you to do when you walk into a thrift store is think about yarn content. This is the first part of what sweater to pick. Yarn content is usually going to be on a tag on the inside of a sweater. Probably not on the back tag. It's going to be on the side panels in between. So just flip it over, look at what the yarn content is. What I usually look for, and you can do research on your own time into what types of yarns to get, but I'm going for natural fibers personally when I do this. So I'm looking for 100% merino wool, silks if that's out there. Luckily for me it was. 100% cotton is really common. I just got 100% organic cotton from one, which is great. And the great thing about natural fibers too is you can dye them after. So if you find a sweater, that's in the perfect color you want, just get something that's natural fiber and then you can dye it. And obviously there's color theory into it. You can't dye one color, any color you want, but there's ways to be intentional about it. So yeah, think about the yarn content that you want. Second thing that you want to do is, maybe the most important part, is garment construction. This is why a lot of people were trying to do this with sweaters and it wasn't working out. Garment construction is so important. There are 2 types. So there's either going to be cut and sew knits or there's going to be fully fashioned garments. You need to get a fully fashioned garment. Cut and sew knits are basically where they'll just knit like a huge stockinette panel, just flat knit, and they'll cut out the shapes that they need for their pattern. So what's going to happen is when you go and unravel a cut and sew knit is you're just going to get strands of yarn because, you know, the sides have been cut. And they've been like serged at the seams. So that's definitely not going to work. You'd waste a lot of time doing that and you'd waste a sweater. So you want a fully fashioned garment. And a fully fashioned garment is a garment that has been fully constructed on the machine. Like each panel, each sleeve, everything is all shaped on the machine. There's no cutting or anything. There's just increases and decreases. So in order to figure out if it's cut and sew versus fully fashioned is to look for those increases or decreases. Right here along the edge of the sweater, you can see that there are little like knots almost. Those are increases and decreases that were made on the machine. So that means this was fully fashioned on the machine. You can see them way clear on the sleeve. Look at that. It's not always going to be this clear, I will say. I also got this like navy yarn, probably going to be a little harder for you to tell, but I've also just been doing this for a while, so you can kind of tell when it's like a cut and sew and when it's not. But yeah, you can also see it on like this one. Some of them are easier to tell, some of them aren't, but if you're a beginner, just try and go for something that you can tell very easily, like this one with all the very clear increases and decreases. Okay, so now that you've figured out that it's a fully fashioned garment, that's perfect. It's got the yarn content that you want. The next thing you want to look at is whether or not it's felted. Now, felted materials when there's heat and friction applied. So then the yarn kind of like mats together. I'm sure you've seen felt before. Well, the thing with thrifted sweaters is a lot of the time they have a lot of wear, a lot of washes or anything, and some people don't like fully take care of them the way they should. So the yarn tends to felt a little bit, and that makes it really hard to unravel sometimes, which brings me to my second point. You can't get any type of yarn from this. This was super easy to unravel because it's cotton and silk. It's super smooth, right? But you can't, so that means you can't be going for like a super fuzzy yarn. It's just not gonna work. Frogging mohair is horrible. I just don't. I mean, you can try if you want to, but that has never really worked for me, and I think it's a waste of a sweater, a waste of your time. I think those are just, you're better off buying those. This goes for novelty yarn as well, things with a lot of like slubs in them. And then next thing that kind of goes along with this, because the felting of the yarn, it's the stability of the garment that I'm worried about. So holes and blemishes, if there's like a tiny hole in like the arm and you're like, oh, it's fine, I'll lose a little bit of yarn, but for the most part it's intact, that hole is an indicator that the yarn is probably not as strong as it used to be. So I'd be worried about breakage with that type of sweater, so I kind of avoid that. If there's like a little stain in it, that's fine if you think you can get it out, but for the most part I try and get sweaters that are in a good condition, a good enough condition to be knit into a new garment and worn again and again. No color work. Color work is a no. There are instances where you could do this, where if it's like a blocked sweater, so like a sleeve is one color, a panel is one color, that's probably fine. You'll get like one color skein, you know. But please don't be going for like a Fair Isle or like Intarsia knit sweater, because then you're just going to get little scraps of yarn again. It's going to be the same as like a cut and sew knit. It's just not worth it, I don't think. Same with like a lot of beading on top of it or something. Like, I don't know. It's just easier with this method to get something that's plain knit, fully fashioned. And then the last thing you want to look at for what sweater to pick is just gauge. So if you have a bulky knitting machine or you're doing by hand, you want to get something that's a thicker gauge, obviously, and then like DK weight and stuff like that. If you're getting a sweater that's super thin, like don't go for sweaters that are like too thin. You know what I mean? Like fingering weight below. It's just like not worth your time, I really don't think. But yeah, again, it just depends on what project you're doing. Just pay attention to those. But the main thing out of this chapter, what sweater to pick, is garment construction. You need a fully fashioned garment. Yeah, so by now you should be at the thrift store. You've got the sweater of your dreams, leaving the thrift store. Also look at price, you know, but I mean, most of the time it's going to be under 15, I think. Okay, so after you've removed the tags, you're just going to staple these together and save this for your records, because after you unravel and make your cakes and whatnot, you're going to knit a little swatch, staple all of this together so you know exactly what the yarn content is, because it's very easy to forget. Because if you're like me, you're doing this with a million different types of sweaters, so it's very easy to quickly forget what the yarn content is, and because it's not something you bought from the store with like the little tag, you're just not going to know unless you save it. So save these for later. Okay, so I decided to bring filming inside for a second because you couldn't really see the way that I was finding the chain to unravel. I already disconnected the panels, and I'm just going to relink it on the machine to show you how you'll be able to find the chain. So the way that garments are usually linked together, they'll put them on a linking machine, not a knitting machine, or, you know, if someone's doing a small batch, maybe they will link it on the machine. But they'll basically link from the sleeve right here all the way down to the bottom. Sometimes it is just linked, like they'll link the sleeve separately and the panels separately, but for the most part, you usually find the start of the chain at the sleeve. So when you have your sweater, you want to go to this bit of the sleeve, the bottom of it. So I'm just going to link this together super quick. And then you should be able to see the chain. I just wanted to show it here because, I don't know, it was just too hard for me to try and pick it up and explain, especially when I was filming it outside in this way. It's just super clear because I know this is a beginner's tutorial, so I want it to be as easy as possible. Okay, so now that I've linked it, the way that they usually finish off the chain is with another chain. So they'll do like 3 or 4 little bits, and then they'll pull and cut. And then what they'll do is they'll take this little bit and tuck it in on the inside and weave it through. So you're not going to be able to see this just like right away at the thrift store. It's going to be tucked behind or like weaved into these parts here, so you're not going to be able to see it. So it's just easier if you find the chain itself, look at which way it's running, and know that you have to go opposite the direction that the V's are facing. So you can see the V's here, they're going this way. And if you know basic crochet, you know, when you're chaining, it's going like in that direction. So if you try and go down here and unravel it this way, you're just going to get knots and it's not going to come undone. So you have to be looking for the right direction of the V's. Think of them as maybe arrows. So if they're pointing that way, you want to start at the back end. So if you can find this little bit, that'd be great. And then you can just unhook the top part of it and then just start pulling. Or if that's too difficult, you can just go to the back and find this part, not the V's, the opposite side of that. You can find that and very carefully cut. Make sure you're not cutting the actual garment. Cut just like 1 or 2. And once you do that, you should be able to pull it a little bit. And then come to the other side. Oops. Come to the other side. And then start pulling. And then it'll just all come undone. And that is how you separate the panels. Okay, so that other sweater was just for me to show you the increases and decreases on how to pick a good sweater, but I'm actually going to be unraveling this one because I've already started it, as you saw with the cakes, so I just want to continue this before I start unraveling a whole new one. So yeah, once you find the chain, whether you cut it to find it or find the end linking chain, just pull it apart. Easy like that. Sometimes they do this annoying thing where they like sew with normal thread like the panels together at like just the seams and stuff, and it makes it impossible to take apart unless you cut those. So now I've disconnected the sleeve, which is awesome. So all I have to do now is unlink the sleeve itself, and then I'll be able to start winding into hanks. And again, hanks are like this. So once you've unlinked all your panel pieces and you've started pulling the cord, unraveling it all, you want to be wrapping it around your arm as you go, and that's what this shape is from. So you can see where I had been wrapping it around. And before you start wrapping it too much, you do want to mark your end pieces because it'll just make it so much easier for you to find it later. So just mark it with the same cord that you're going to use to tie at each end. Okay, washing your hanks. All you're going to do is grab a bucket of some sort and start filling it with lukewarm water and then your conditioner of choice. Now, I know that a lot of people use Wool Wash for this, but I just like to use what I have, and this way, using my conditioner, it smells like me. So I just plop that into the bucket and let it fill up, and then by the end of it, you'll have the bucket filled with conditioned water. The reason we're using conditioner is because natural fiber yarn, it's basically like hair, so just kind of treat it like hair. So you're going to take all of the hanks that you've just prepared and go ahead and plop them into the water. Now, it was a little hard for me to film this because my tripod was in the way, but basically what I'm doing is kind of squishing the water into the hanks because they tend to be a little resistant to it for a second. And now I'm just taking the conditioner, the water, and just rubbing my hands through it, trying to get all of those wrinkles from being held in their structure in the old sweater out. And it doesn't need to be like perfectly straight, but we're just kind of trying to relax the yarn a little bit. So I'm just squishing, gently pulling, because again, water is going to make the yarn a lot more fragile. So you just want to be careful overall. And then after you feel like you've conditioned it pretty well, soaked it a bit, you just want to wring out all the water that you can. You can kind of shake it out, twist it, make sure you're not tangling it too much, but just squeeze out all the water that you can before you hang them up to dry. Okay, by now all of your hanks are washed and they're pretty damp, they're pretty heavy probably. And all you need to do is set them out to dry. And a thing that I wanted to know about the drying process is when you have something that's really thick, you've gotten a lot of yarn from it, which is great, it tends to get really damp in the middle, obviously, so it's going to be harder to dry in those spots. So when you're leaving it out to dry, I just go back like I'll leave it overnight and then I'll come back in the morning and like kind of flip it over or like push apart the middle so that some of like the denser spots get dried more easily, and just make sure that it's completely 100% dry before winding. Okay, the last step of the process is to wind your hanks into little balls, into cakes that you can use later to knit. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to need a piece of sketchbook paper and you're just going to roll it into a tube. Mine has collapsed a little bit. Obviously, you know that I like to recycle things, so I'm just going to use the same thing over and over until it breaks. So what I want you to do is take your hank, you're going to lay it flat, and you want to find that end piece that you have. So what I want to do is flip it over so that when I'm pulling, it's going to be coming up the right way. Now, the first thing you're going to do is just tape that end piece, secure it to your little tube. You want to go and cut the four corners so that the hank is released. You want to be really careful when cutting because obviously you don't want to cut the yarn itself. So what I like to do is I have these long tails, right? And I just want to pull up and just kind of stick my finger in there to like separate it a little from the hank. So separate it and make a cut. And I usually do this when it's laying flat, but I just wanted to show you. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all four corners. Okay, and now that my four corners are cut, I usually save these scraps because you can use them for later until there's too many knots in them. All right, so now you want to have whatever arm you're using to like wind, you want the hank opposite the way you're going, so that it doesn't start to tangle. So if I'm like winding it over here, but the hank is over here, it's gonna get all caught. And you wanna wrap it down. It's gonna get a lot squishier than this. All right, and now you're gonna pick up a little bit of yarn from the hank. You can see how it's like pulling on it. So you don't wanna do it too fast for a second, especially when you're starting. And when I'm doing this, I've got some pretty tight tension because I want the middle to be strong. I'm going to go and turn, and I'm going to go back up, making little X's, and I'm going to go down. And now I'm going to loosen up my tension a little bit because the yarn is going to start grabbing onto itself, and if I do it too tight, it's just going to slip right off. So I'm going to pull some more yarn again, and I'm going to go all the way to the top, and I'm very lightly placing this because you can see if I went too tight, it's just going to pull right down. So do it a little lightly. So lightly wrapping, turn, lightly wrap. You can see how it's scooting down. Turn and wrap. And once it starts to kind of come in on itself, you can go a little faster, and I'm increasing my tension now. I'm doing it a little tighter. I'm even going to like scoot this up a bit because you can tell the shape is going to be this width, so it kind of just collapses on itself. You want to be doing maybe like 10 wraps around and turn. It doesn't need to be exact. You don't need to count really, but just enough. Turn, just enough, and just keep remembering you're going corner to corner every time. Corner to corner. So you're just going to want to continue doing this until your hank is all out. Sometimes if it tangles while you're in the winding process, that can be really annoying, but usually if you just shake really hard, it'll untangle itself because it's usually just a few loops caught together, and if you just shake out the yarn, it'll undo itself and it should be fine. If the yarn is conditioned and you properly prepared it, it's, tangles are going to happen. That's just like the nature of knitting itself and like crochet. Everybody knows that, but for the most part it should be fine. And you can always just scooch this up, start building that form. But yeah, this is why I prefer to do it by hand than with a ball winder, because in a ball winder I feel like it's just stuck on there and then you can't, stuck on the Swift, and then when there's tangles it's like, well, now what am I going to do? It just is difficult. And this part does take a while. This is probably one of the most consuming parts because with unraveling, it's like, okay, you find the chain, you cut it, or you find the end part and you unravel that. And that takes like a bit of time, but not super long. Drying maybe takes a while, but this part is probably one of the most time consuming, I guess. It will take me like maybe 30-40 minutes just to wind one ball of yarn, which obviously a lot of people think that's like too much time, but I don't know. I think it's worth it in the end. That should be the end of it. I'm going to do a quick little recap. Okay, what sweater to pick? You want to pick something that doesn't have color work. It's a straight knit, fully fashioned, absolutely. No blemishes, holes, whatever, and it's the right gauge and yarn content that you want. Second step, how to unravel. You're going to find the chain links at each seam. You're going to unlink it, pull it apart, pull apart the sleeves, pull all of that apart. And as you're unwinding each section, you're going to wrap it around your arm, and then you should have a nice thick skein ready to tie at the four corners. And then you're going to tie on the four corners with strong yarn so that it doesn't break in the washing process. All right, that was prepping the hanks for a wash. Washing and drying, you're going to fill a bucket with lukewarm water and your conditioner of choice, your wool wash of choice, whatever. Not shampooed, not like laundry detergent. It's like hair. Think about it as like hair. You're going to like gently pull the yarn. Try not to pull it too hard if it's a fragile yarn. Wash it through, everything like that. Then you're going to leave them out to dry. Make sure you flip them a little bit. Make sure they're 100% dry before you go to wind them into cakes. And last step, winding into cakes, you're going to tape down one part of it, wrap around with tight tension and then loose tension and slowly tighter as you go around, forming like little figure eights as you go. You're going to leave them on the cone for about a day or so, not even if you don't want to, and you're going to pull them off, and then you're going to knit something super awesome like this baby tee. Oh yay. Thanks a lot for watching. I tried to condense this as much as possible. I was thinking about doing it as just like a reel tutorial, which I might still do as just like another way to get it out to people, but try to condense it as much as possible because there's a lot of information you need to know to not waste a whole sweater. But yeah, I'd really appreciate it if you checked out my Instagram. That's my like main form of posting, I guess. And I really hope this inspires you to like be more sustainable in your yarn practices and to also learn how to knit or learn how to crochet. This is a great way to get into it without it being super expensive. You know, a lot of people say that about textile arts. It's too expensive. I can't buy yarn. I'm like, yes, you can. I just bought, $10 yarn and made 2 garments out of it. So, lots of things you can do. Thanks for watching. I'm going to link my Instagram. The train is coming. Bye.